There are moments in life that feel like whispers from fate, quiet, fleeting, yet hauntingly precise. You think of someone and they call. A stranger says something that answers a question you've buried in your mind. Events align with such eerie precision that logic hesitates. These moments, the cracks in the veil, aren't just coincidences. They are messages from the deeper mechanics of reality. And if you have the courage to listen, to see not just with your eyes, but with your mind sharpened, then what seems like chance becomes strategy. What appears accidental becomes advantage. This is the unseen world of synchronicities. But let us be clear, this is not mysticism. It is power hidden in perception. Most people stumble through life deaf to the signals around them. They chalk everything up to randomness, blind to the architecture of meaning that surrounds them. But those who rise, those who rule not only others but themselves, learn to read the invisible language of connection. They interpret patterns, seize timing, and act with instinct that is honed, not born. Synchronicities do not reveal themselves to the passive observer. They emerge for those willing to pierce the surface of things. When the world feels like it's speaking directly to you, it probably is, but only if you've trained yourself to listen through the noise. Every major decision, every turning point in the life of a leader, an artist, a visionary is filled with signs, but only the awake catch them. Only the strategic understand their weight. Understand this: synchronicity is a psychological tool as much as it is a metaphysical hint. It's a mirror to your unconscious, reflecting your fears, your desires, your hidden goals. And if you can read this mirror, you stop reacting. You begin orchestrating. When others are still wondering why, you already know how. When they ask why me, you ask why now. And that single shift in perspective, that is the gap between wandering and winning. In a world of uncertainty, synchronicities are the compass that points where logic fails. They allow you to feel when to strike, when to hold, when to disappear, and when to rise. Timing, after all, is not just important. It is everything. And those who understand timing, those who sense the rhythm beneath the chaos, often move like they've been here before. As if history whispers its secrets only to them. And here's the truth: those whispers can be engineered. When your inner state is aligned with clarity and direction, the world begins to reflect it back. Events start to coincide, but it's not the world changing. It's you, finally tuned into its hidden currents. Like a master sailor reading invisible winds, you begin to move through life with grace, precision, and force. But don't be mistaken, synchronicities are not always kind. They can be brutal. They show you what you're ignoring. They mirror your self-deceptions. They strip the layers off your ego until what remains is a raw, real self. And if you fear that, you will run from their messages. But if you embrace it, you gain an edge most never find, a clarity that turns chaos into choice. What separates the merely successful from the deeply powerful is this: the ability to see the field not only for what it is, but for what it wants to become. That's what synchronicity reveals: a map written in events. A code hidden in timing, a future shaped not by accident but by attention. Attention to the right signs at the right moment, interpreted through the right mindset. Power comes not from force alone but from foresight. And foresight is sharpened when you trust the signals that logic can't always decode. To walk this path is not to be ruled by emotion, but to harness intuition as the sharpest blade in your arsenal. To rule yourself, to master others, to shape time and choice like a sculptor with marble. You must be attuned to the messages that ride on silence, to the movements of the unseen. So let us not ask if coincidences matter. Let us ask why they appear when they do. Let us stop dismissing the profound as random. Let us instead train ourselves to see, because in this world, especially in the shadows where true decisions are made, the advantage goes not to the strong, but to the perceptive. Let us continue then, deeper into the realm where influence is not spoken but felt, where timing is not guessed but known. It begins by mastering the inner environment, your emotions, your impulses, your narratives. When your internal world becomes still, the external world starts reflecting patterns with more clarity. You'll see allies emerge from enemies, and obstacles become signals. Suddenly, your failures point you, with greater precision, than your victories ever did. This is not about luck. It's about alignment between intention and action, between vision and moment. It's about knowing that chaos too has a rhythm. Those who dominate in this life are not those who avoid uncertainty, but those who walk through it with eyes sharpened by vision, hearts shielded by purpose, and minds trained to catch the subtle glimmers of fate in motion. When you operate like this, people call it instinct. They call it charisma. They say you have something. What you truly have is command over the invisible, the ability to read people without words, to time your decisions not when the world says go, but when you sense the silent green light inside you. That's the edge. That's how empires, of wealth, of mind, of destiny, are built. Keep listening. The world is always speaking. Synchronicities as strategic signals are far more than intriguing curiosities or poetic quirks of fate. They are active markers within a deeper system of order, waiting to be deciphered by those with heightened perception. These moments, which seem to align with uncanny precision, are not merely coincidental. They function like coded messages embedded in the flow of reality, offering feedback, insight, or warning, often long before a conscious explanation is available. In the hands of the aware individual, synchronicities can become tools of decision, making, navigation, and even control, not over others, but over the trajectory of one's life. What distinguishes the strategic mind is its refusal to accept surface chaos as truth. It senses order behind randomness, patterns in the mist, and meaning in events that others overlook. To treat synchronicities as signals requires a complete reorientation of attention. The average person is fixated on outcomes and visible consequences, rarely reflecting on the deeper origins or surrounding context of an event. But the strategist, especially the psychological one, knows that the moment something oddly fits, even if subtle or fleeting, it must be studied. It might be a phrase overheard at just the right moment, a symbol repeating itself across unrelated environments, or a missed train that leads to an unexpected encounter. These are not simply novelties, they are data points in a living field of information. The disciplined mind tracks them not for superstition, but for pattern recognition, and in doing so, it begins to map connections where others see only noise. Critical here is the relationship between the internal world and the external events. Synchronicities, while seemingly out there, often mirror what is forming or shifting within. They arrive not as random miracles, but as echoes of psychological movement, signs that your unconscious is aligning with external dynamics. When someone begins contemplating a life change, for instance, they might begin to notice increasing synchronicities related to that area. New people appear. Books seem to fall into their path. Opportunities that had always existed now become visible. The signal here is not only that a door is opening, it is that the observer is finally prepared to see the door at all. That readiness alters perception, and perception, in turn, alters reality. The truly strategic use of synchronicities is not passive. It demands psychological readiness, an alert and flexible awareness that is not distracted by surface drama. It involves asking sharper questions in the moment. What is this moment showing me about my direction? Why this and why now? What energy or thought preceded this event? These questions turn synchronicities from curiosities into instruments of refinement. They help individuals make adjustments to their choices, sense when to act or retreat, and recognize the subtle green lights. That logic alone cannot validate. The strategic mind doesn't wait for validation. It acts from the convergence of intuition, timing, and symbolic intelligence. It's also essential to understand that synchronicities can serve as warnings just as much as affirmations. A persistent pattern of subtle disruptions, plans breaking down at the last minute, conversations going in circles, unexpected resistance, can be just as meaningful as smooth, flowing success. These are signals too. The strategist interprets them not as personal failures, but as redirections. Every signal, whether affirmative or resistant, is feedback about the alignment or misalignment between intent, timing, and action. Those who ignore such feedback often find themselves repeating the same mistakes, whereas those attuned to the language of synchronicity pivot early and gain momentum, while others are still deciphering the chaos. Timing is another critical element in the strategic use of synchronicities. Often, a synchronicity does not appear when the desire is strongest, but when the context is ripe. This is not a flaw in the system. It is a test of awareness. Recognizing the difference between personal impatience and actual opportunity is a hallmark of strategic vision. Just because a sign appears does not mean the time is now. It may be a signal to prepare, to observe, to wait for the second sign, the convergence of multiple signals. The strategist becomes a pattern observer over time, and through this patience and patterning, actions become laced with precision. In this way, synchronicities become similar to intelligence reports on a battlefield. The reports don't dictate action, they inform strategy. The leader who wins is not the one with the most brute force, but the one who adapts swiftly to unseen dynamics, who recognizes shifts before they escalate, who understands not only the terrain, but the timing of terrain changes. Life is no different. Synchronicities reveal shifts before they become visible. They are the vibrations before the earthquake, the flicker before the storm, the glance before the move. And if you're trained to catch them, you move faster than the event. You become anticipatory, not reactive. You act when others hesitate. That is strategy, and that is power. Power lies in perception, not in the external conditions we are handed, but in how we interpret, frame, and respond to them. The human experience is not defined solely by what happens to us, but by what we see in what happens. Two people can live through the same event. One will crumble under its weight, the other will extract meaning, advantage, or transformation. The difference is not in the event, but in the lens through which it is viewed. Perception becomes a psychological weapon, a lever that can shift internal state and external results. Those who master perception are never at the mercy of reality. They are shapers of it. And in the realm of synchronicities, this truth becomes especially potent, because the ability to perceive patterns, signals, and meaning in the noise gives rise to a form of intuitive power that logic cannot replicate. The average mind seeks certainty. It needs things to make sense before it can act. But power does not operate on the terms of certainty. It thrives in ambiguity. Those who wait for all facts, all proofs, all guarantees are always late to the game. The perceptive mind, however, senses shifts before they solidify. It reads energy, behavior, mood, tone. It picks up on the subtle tensions in a room, the silence in a conversation, the slight deviation in a familiar pattern. This sensitivity to nuance is not weakness. It is strategic sensitivity. It allows a person to maneuver before others are even aware that something has changed. In the realm of leadership, persuasion, or personal mastery, this sensitivity becomes lethal in its effectiveness. A person who understands the mechanics of perception can influence others without speaking. They can sense opportunities where others feel threat. They can take control in moments of disorder because their internal map is not rigid, it's fluid. They don't need the world to confirm their beliefs. They shape their beliefs based on what the moment demands, and in doing so, they often appear clairvoyant. What people call instinct or charisma is often the refined outcome of an evolved perceptual system, one that has learned how to read subtlety, to feel timing, to interpret symbolic and emotional information faster than others. Perception also dictates emotional resilience. Those with weak perception collapse when things go wrong. They see only failure, defeat, or loss, but the powerful mind reinterprets. It reframes a setback as recalibration. It extracts data from the breakdown. It decodes the why, not just the what. This ability to reinterpret events in real time creates inner stability, and from this psychological foundation comes external influence. People follow those who do not panic. They are drawn to those who see patterns in chaos. The perceptive individual becomes a node of calm in the storm, a psychological anchor that others gravitate toward. Control of perception also plays out in the way people rate each other. In any interaction, Whether negotiation, manipulation, collaboration, or conflict, the person who understands the other's perception holds power. If you can anticipate how another interprets a situation, you can adjust your language, your tone, even your silence to shift the dynamic. You don't need to force outcomes, you only need to shift perception. Influence then becomes not about pressure, but about perspective. The greatest leaders and strategists rarely argue their point. They create conditions in which the other person arrives at the point themselves. That is perception used as a subtle art of domination. Even self-perception becomes a battlefield. Most people internalize their roles, stories, and limitations based on past conditioning. They walk through life not as they are, but as they were taught to be. But the perceptive mind challenges this. It rewrites the narrative. It doesn't ask, who am I supposed to be? It asks, what perspective would make me most effective in this moment? Identity becomes flexible, a strategy rather than a prison. This doesn't mean inauthenticity. It means freedom, the freedom to shift, reframe, and evolve without clinging to a single fixed self. What's even more powerful is how perception alters reality. When someone begins to see patterns of synchronicity, alignment, and deeper meaning, the brain rewires itself to seek out more of the same. This creates a feedback loop between belief and experience. And suddenly, what was once considered extraordinary becomes normal, not because the world changed, but because perception expanded. This is how visionaries operate. They are not predicting the future. They are perceiving a future possibility and acting as if it already exists. Their belief warps probability. Their perception becomes the seed of reality's transformation. Those who lack this perceptual power rely solely on evidence. They need proof before they believe, and so they move slow, missing the first signs, always arriving after the fact. But those who live at the edge of perception, who trust the alignment of signals, symbols, and inner knowing, often move with speed and accuracy that defies explanation. They do not need to overpower the world because they see into it. And from that vision, they direct energy, influence outcomes, and stay ahead of the curve, not through dominance, but through perception sharpened into power. Harnessing the invisible for mastery requires a complete shift in how one interacts with the world. Most people are trapped in a rigid model of reality that is entirely sensory-based. They only respond to what they can touch, see, hear, or measure. But those who reach high levels of psychological influence, leadership, or transformation understand that the visible is just the surface of a far more complex structure. Beneath every event, every emotion, every coincidence, lies an unseen layer of causes, intentions, and energies. Those who can navigate this hidden architecture can move through life with an authority that others cannot comprehend. They become less reactive and more deliberate, less bound by circumstance and more attuned to strategic flow. The invisible realm is composed of subtle cues, unconscious signals, emotional undercurrents, symbolic resonance, and nonlinear logic. Mastery of this realm doesn't happen through intellect alone. It requires intuitive development, emotional discipline, and inner alignment. The mind must learn to sit in uncertainty, to listen without the need to immediately define or conclude. The invisible world speaks not in declarations but in hints, impressions, feelings that rise before the thought forms. When someone learns to recognize and respond to these subtle prompts, they begin to operate with a kind of foresight that looks like genius from the outside, but is really the result of deep inner attunement. This level of mastery begins with internal calibration. The mind must become quiet enough to detect signals that others overlook. That requires removing the noise of chronic overthinking, emotional reactivity, and external validation. As long as the mind is cluttered with mental chatter or consumed by shallow distractions, the signals from the unseen world are drowned out. It's not that synchronicities or symbolic events aren't occurring. They are, but the individual is too out of tune to receive them. Mastery begins the moment one disciplines their attention to stay alert, not anxiously, but precisely in the present. In this state, even a seemingly mundane interaction can become a portal to insight. A word repeated by two strangers in different settings, a number sequence that keeps appearing, a line in a film that mirrors a thought you had hours earlier. These are not random, they are pattern echoes. The deeper self, the unconscious mind, is always communicating with the environment, pulling in reflections of its current state. When one becomes aware of this mirror-like interaction between self and world, they can start using it strategically. Decisions no longer rely solely on facts. They incorporate intuition, resonance, timing, and context. This is not guesswork. It's a deeper form of sensing, one rooted in psychological clarity. Those who master the invisible also understand that emotion is one of its primary carriers. Emotion is not just a response to the world, it is a magnet. What you feel consistently becomes the attractor field for the kinds of synchronicities and patterns you will notice. If someone lives in anxiety, they'll continuously align with chaotic timing, miscommunication, and resistance. If they shift into internal clarity and aligned purpose, the world seems to bend. To meet them, opportunities line up, the right people appear, delays dissolve. This is not magic. It is the unseen intelligence of coherence at work. When your energy is coherent, the signals you send out, and the ones you pick up, become more accurate. Psychological mastery also involves symbolic literacy. Symbols, metaphors, dreams, and recurring archetypes are all part of the invisible language of synchronicity. They are not to be interpreted literally, but symbolically. When something recurs in your life, an animal, an object, a theme, it's often an unconscious pattern demanding awareness or integration. The strategic mind does not ignore these cues. It studies them, works with them, lets them inform decision-making. For instance, repeated images of bridges might signal a need for connection or transition. Repeated encounters with broken technology might be reflecting inner resistance to progress. The key is not to become superstitious, but to become symbolically fluent. The deeper this fluency becomes, the more refined one's movements through life. Mastery means knowing when to wait, when to act, when to speak, and when to disappear, not because of analysis, but because of alignment with something deeper than thought. Those who have mastered this operate with an elegant precision. They move like chess players 5 moves ahead, not because they have all the information, but because they trust a deeper sensing that information alone cannot provide. Such people don't just experience synchronicities, they create them. Their inner state becomes so aligned, so focused, that the environment begins to respond in uncanny ways. They walk into rooms and shift the mood without trying. They make decisions that appear bold but land flawlessly. They experience sudden breakthroughs and serendipities that seem too precise to be planned. But it's not luck, it's not fate. It's mastery over the invisible, earned through relentless self-awareness, psychological discipline, and the courage to trust what cannot yet be seen. In this way, life becomes a dynamic feedback loop between inner and outer. The invisible is no longer something to fear or doubt. It becomes the most trusted advisor. Where others rely on rules, these individuals rely on rhythm. Where others search for certainty, they follow signals, and in doing so, they rise, not by force but by flow, not by control, but by connection to a deeper intelligence that guides those bold enough to perceive it.